It's the Justin Palmer Show. Here we go. Woo! Woo!
All right, man. We should have hit record 15 minutes ago.
Yeah.
We were getting into it. It's good to see you. It's been a little while.
You do. Yeah, because this is what seeing each other is now.
I know.
Normal, as they call it.
I did my mom's 70th birthday on Zoom with our family.
You did?
You know, yeah.
Has she got operated yet? I think you said that she was.
Yeah, she got one. I think she said she gets her second one next week.
Yeah.
Which I still have mixed feelings about.
The vaccine?
Yeah.
How so?
Well, along the lines of what we were getting into before we hit that magical record button.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and I haven't, look, I'm not a scientist, right? I'm not like looking at any hard data to back this up, but just like what I've been reading and a few things that I've watched, like you remember, what was it? Like David Cho, he referenced the Hadza people in Africa. Yeah. And that all these scientists are studying their gut biome because they're the last hunter-gatherers, like one of the last hunter-gatherers groups in the world, like true hunter-gatherers. And they like drink water just like off a puddle off the ground, and they're fine, and they eat food in nature that's like, you know, most people wouldn't touch. And their gut biome is apparently incredibly strong, right? So I'm taking that and I'm layering in that on the background of like a virus that everybody's taking shots for, that they infect you with like a partially dead virus so that your body can learn how to do it. And I'm like, man, that your body can learn how to, sorry, I didn't explain that well. Your body can learn how to fight it. I don't even think that's necessary if you're living properly and eating properly and like producing your own food with like intention and love with your whole family. And maybe not even eating meat, which like, you know, that's another level, because I eat a decent amount of like pasture raised meat. But, you know, I just think this is just going to create a continued weakening of everyone's immune system. And then there's going to be another thing that comes up. And then it's going to be, well, just vaccinate this. And I'm not a doctor. And I do believe that like the medical community is extremely important for things that are severe. And I don't know, man, I feel like people just should focus on getting healthy, like truly healthy. That's what I meant.
Yeah. You know, and I'm not sure where I stand on it, I guess. There's just so many things that are unclear and incomplete. And I'm not even sure where I stand on what you're saying, because the suggestion seems to be, are we stronger as human beings now than we used to be or not? And I'm not even sure if that's true, because are people weaker now physically and mentally than they were, you know, in even the recent past? Because I'm not sure if like life expectancy data and things like that tell the whole story. But you know, the top two killers in the United States are heart disease and cancer. So, you know, is modern medicine improving our ability to survive those things, or are we as a species overall weaker and more susceptible to these viral situations like we're in today? I don't know. I'm sure somebody knows. I'm sure somebody's got the answer there. But I'm along the same lines. I'm apprehensive about the vaccine. But you know, if we even have access to it, and if it was available, would we get it? We haven't been tested with that yet because we have no access to it. But if it was just like walk into a Walgreens at any point and just get it and be on your way, and if it was just that easy, would we be getting it? I don't know, because that situation isn't reality. So you know, so I'm just, it's a mixed bag. I'm all over the place on it today because, you know, I kind of live and breathe this COVID thing with with this company that I'm working with today, and it's confusing because the data's all over the place, people's opinion is all over the place, and even the medical industry is kind of flip flopping on, in some ways about what does and doesn't work and what risks exist and what don't. And then you add the political climate in there, and it just muddies the water about, okay, well, what the hell should I be doing exactly? And how do I know that that's actually what's right for me and not just some agenda that somebody is shoving down my throat? And the social pressure here in California is super high. Like, you can't even really have an opinion on this without fear of public crucifixion if you're by any, go out there and say, hey, I don't want to take the vaccine. Or for that, if you go out and say anything that is that's contrary to like the popular social justice warrior movement in the Bay Area, then there's there's no remorse for people out here to fully cast judgment on on your apprehension by claiming that you are either totally ignorant to science or just like some kind of shill representative for the Trump campaign. It's you know what I mean?
Isn't that over? I mean, dude, I haven't watched the news in a very long time. I haven't read or watched anything. I like completely, I'm on an island, like both physically and mentally and philosophically, by choice. So I really don't know what's going on. I mean, I thought my neighbors told me there was like a smooth transition of power. I honestly don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like it. I think that there's really 3 or 4. I mean, Biden signed like 40 or 50 executive orders in this past week or two, and there's 3 or 4 political things that have come up or news events that have come up that are a little bit interesting, that are worth discussing because they point out a few larger issues that are interesting. One is this open transgender competition in sports. The second is this, the Keystone Pipeline cancellation. I think that was kind of a thing in the news for a period of time. And third is this GameStop stock run up, which is kind of interesting. Now, I don't think any of these things affect us personally. And the vast majority of people definitely have a strong opinion, it seems, on all these areas. But now it started like a whole meme generation about how I see posts on my Facebook wall like of memes where people are like, "Oh, I didn't know that 90% of all people are experts in the stock market." Everybody has an opinion now on what the Robinhood GameStop run up really looks like, and so did you hear about that scenario? We can start there because that to me is one of the more interesting things that has at least some chance of reshaping a system that is hugely flawed, and it's unknown whether or not it will actually turn into anything. But it's certainly an interesting discussion, just the philosophy of money exchange and transfer, how that relates to individual wealth creation, what that's going to mean for impact for things like cryptocurrency, because at the end of the day, we're still going to have to live in a world where money exists, and
exchange. Exchange. Look, I've heard about all these things, literally as much as you just said on each thing. That's the most I've heard on any of it. I heard about GameStop. Somebody mentioned it to me on a conference call, and I can already know without even reading about it, I already know the human kind of atrocities that are associated with it. Right. And my point I was like, look, I don't really care. Right. Yeah. I told a guy I was talking to, I was talking to Chris Williams, the producer of the show, the other day. And I was like, look, man, if you told people tomorrow that leaves had the most value of everything in the universe, the fucking trees on the earth would be stripped within 72 hours. Yeah. Right. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what you call it. It doesn't matter. It's cryptocurrency. It's money. Dude, it's all made up. That's it. Yeah. Right. It's all fucking human constructed as a way of exchange. And I think these like big, massive markets and these big, massive things, this is an opportunity for everybody to go a little more micro, go a little more into your community, exchange things. It doesn't mean like people shouldn't work, right? It means work in your community. I don't know. That's just, all these things are like a major distraction, I think. And like I've been working on the last couple months, which is why I've been pretty quiet, just like freeing my mind from even being kind of pestered from that stuff. Right.
Yeah. I guess the question that relates to that, to looking at things in that way, the question still is, becomes more fundamental then. Do you think that the United States stock market is a system where you or other individuals should put money or have a chance to create wealth?
Well, I don't look. That's a good question. I would peel it back another layer, right? Because I think the more that I take a step back, the more that I see that society is shaped by collective thought, right? And collective thought shapes everything from a cultural perspective. And so as long as people think that they should put a piece of paper that they earned for spending their time or energy on something, right, into a system that should grow over time, then I think if you believe in that system, then that's what you should do, right? I think I'm in a place where I'm like questioning, is that a naturally designed system? You know, and if it's not a naturally designed, you can be, let me ask you a question. Let me put it differently. If you had a piece of land that was enough for you to house your family for generations and grow all of the food that you needed for your entire family, potentially your extended family. Let's say you had 4 or 5 acres, right? And you didn't have to work for any amount of money because your housing and your food was already provided for you. What would you do with your time?
Yeah, I think that if that was the situation that we're in, I think there's two parts that really stand out. One is fostering the relationships that matter, and two is going to be, well, what is it that I can do to impact other people in a positive way? You know, so those are. I think that part of human nature is to invest a lot of time into both of those categories, and I think that I think society is set up to do it, kind of counterproductively or in a negative way. And there's some theories, even Tony says that that's one of the reasons why even violence exists in the human species, is our need to influence other people. And that what's the easiest way for you to cast your influence onto someone else is I just put a gun to your head, and so that's so fundamental as part of our hedonic need as a species that violence will always exist. So but I think that if we go back to just what the fundamental drivers are, if you take away the idea that, hey, I've got some place to live and I've got some place to eat, now what do I do with my time? I think the fact that we're sort of these pack-oriented individuals, and that we get a lot of gratification off of building those connections and growing those connections. And then secondly is that influence that we can have in other people's lives, I think are things that will be very key to fulfillment if those other fundamentals are already solved. So my time would probably be spent, at least I would hope, in those two areas. And of course, you can only do that if you sort of quiet the noise of other outside pressure that's sort of telling you what you should be doing with your time. Because if you solve that and you're still on the news or Facebook, you're going to be inundated with content that says, you're a piece of shit unless you're, wearing $700 shoes. So, uh, you know,
You
so
need this $500,000 car.
if that isn't quiet, or at least you don't abstain from that in life, I'm not sure you can really invest in these other areas that effectively, because you're always going to have this distraction. Like, look, my friendships are great and my relationships are great and I'm contributing to other people, but I didn't get a Tesla.
Yeah.
So I think that, and there'll always be somebody out there that is ready to tell you that you're inadequate because you didn't meet an arbitrary standard of which they set. So, and that's the basis for why consumerism and capitalism exists in the country. Without that kind of pressure, then the need for economic growth in the United States wouldn't exist. So,
Right.
and
Or
so
anywhere in the world, really.
anyway, right? But
Yeah.
I think that divorcing yourself from that, in some ways, is even talked about on like fantasy sci-fi TV shows. There's one old show called Revolution, where I think it's called Revolution, where all the power in the world just stopped overnight. There's no power at all, electricity whatsoever. Stopped existing, so no device could boot up and you had no electricity whatsoever. And what society turned into after that, it very much resembles what you're talking about, where small communities were built where they kind of all chip in to raise agriculture and farmland. I mean, it sets the human species back like 200 years, just like
But
that.
is it really setting us back? That's my question, right?
It sets
Is
us
it
back
actually
in the-
setting back?
Yeah, so there's theories about that largely authored or made popular by Freeman Dyson about the progress of a civilization, and that the inevitability that you go from like an agricultural state as a society into the development of this kind of technology is an inevitability. And it goes on to say that as it progresses, that the demands that you have as a society or a civilization increase in your consumption of power, and that power is a limited resource, and that you have to go and do some pretty radical stuff to get new power. That's where he came up with things like the Dyson sphere and other celestial objects that harvest power from stars and shit like that. But it's sort of, if you were to take any civilization, say in the entire universe, that there's logic that suggests that they all progress through the same sort of societal pathway that we went to, where first you start you start with agriculture, then you start industrialization, and then you start this economic exchange, and then the invention of cities, which some people have argued is the greatest invention of humankind, is the invention of the modern city, going back all the way to the Roman Empire. But it would be logical to assume that any intelligent civilization would carry the same path, in sort of a similar planet anyways. And that's why people start questioning, well, why the hell aren't they visiting us? Where are they? And it goes back to what we started on before we started to hit record, which is this could very well be as far as we get.
Yeah.
And that, especially in light of this virus sort of thing, that there's been no civilization that gets far enough from this point. You either consume all the energy that you have access to, all the resources that you have access to. There is some global killer, and you never get to the point where you can visit anyone else, because this is as far as intelligent species can really get. And it's sort of a somber approach to intelligent life, and it begs the question about whether we're intelligent at all. But it and maybe I'm being pessimistic because we've been locked down for a damn near a year now. Is that do you think that this is it? Do you think that we get further from this, or is this like we're staring down the barrel of like 100-year brick wall, that at the end of that brick wall we're either out of stuff to dig up and burn in order to create fuel, or we're all going to kill each other, or there's going to be some microbiome or some major event that's just going to wipe out too many people for us as a species to survive. And there is a very logical train of thought that suggests that this has happened billions of times in the universe already, and that the reason why that there's spaceships not flying around everywhere today is because no one got further than this.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, a lot of what I was referencing is shaped by this book series, The Ringing Cedars, which I was telling you about, that came out of Russia in like, I think starting in like the mid 90s. And I won't get into, if anybody's interested in it, I strongly recommend you find a way to get the books. I don't even think they may be on Amazon. I don't even think they are. They're definitely not on Kindle. I bought hard copies, and I think, and just based on my own experiences with like meditation and other things, I think we're tapping into a micro fraction of our true potential in our intelligence and our thoughts. Right. And I don't even know if you need spaceships to travel to other places. Like, you know what I mean? Like I think there's another level beyond that. And I think I think you have to start by like restoring the family unit, man. And by doing that, you're restoring the land, and then you're like living, I know it sounds idealistic, but you're living in peace instead of living in fear and anxiety. You're worried about money. You're worried about war. You're worried about a virus. You're worried about all these things. I don't know, man. And what you said, I think resonates a lot, because I have unplugged, and I've spent a lot of time just peeling back these layers over years, right? It's happened slowly. I mean, I'm a real estate developer, in two of the biggest cities in the country. And for my family, I see another path, right? And that other path, I think, is more reliant on a smaller community that's connected with, like build your own home, right? Build a place. The Ringing Cedar series calls it like a space of love, and if you have that space of love where you're cultivating everything that you grow with, real intention, including your children, right? That the strength and purity of your thoughts, baby number 3 is like screaming in the background. This one is wild, dude. Yeah. She is wild. She firewalked in her mom's belly, it explains why her hair is like white blonde. It's like all the other kids have dark hair, dude. Yeah. She has white blonde hair, like almost translucent,
Yeah. For those that are listening, that is not a metaphor. Tony Robbins has an event at Unleash the Power Within where you literally walk on fire, and Anna, Justin's wife, did that while pregnant. So you can even go back to the science around it. When you got that much adrenaline pumping through your veins and you do something like that, who knows? Maybe it changes the personality.
Dude, she's a lightning bolt, my friend.
One of the things that I heard you say, which is kind of interesting, I want to double click on it, which is thought about, hey, you don't need spaceships to travel through the universe. And if you ask Rogan that, he's going to say, yeah, it's mushrooms. But there is a spiritual idea about that exact thing, which is navigation, celestial navigation within the mind. It's called astral projection. Mm-hmm. Also sharing the name of a 1990s Tel Aviv trance group, all by the same name, astral projection, which if you're into trance, you should check out. Highly complex and technical, long, like kind of thing by a group called Astral Projection. One of my favorites. But the actual art of astral projection, which is totally different, is an outcome of meditation, to where in a very Eastern philosophy, that you can take these universal spiritual journeys through space and time outside of your own body, and it seems like ancient science has suggested, and that Joe Rogan, while hopped up on drugs, has suggested that there are some extremely latent parts of the mind that we have either by design or by training told to be quiet, but that could really be that really one unlocked would change the entirety of human experience. And it's fascinating to think about because the first thing that I want to do is, well, let me get my hands on one of these mushrooms and see what the hell all that's about. But and maybe that's the wrong approach. But what do you think about it? Do you think that's the case? You think we're like in one of these like Morgan Freeman and Scarlett Johansson in the movie Lucy, where only a portion of our mind is really utilized, and the reality is that if we were to unlock those, then all the simplicity of the troubles today would just not exist because those are just a function of the manufactured problems of our reptilian brain.
Yeah, that's pretty much spot on how I think. It's I no, but it's look in I over the past 18 to 24 months, I've read more than I've ever read in my entire life. Right. And the stuff that I'm reading, it like I was like structuring it and I was like, I'm going to read these books and this number of books. And I was doing all this stuff. We talked about this, right? Like the goal setting and all these things. And along the path, something inside me just said, hey man, just follow your heart. You got it figured out. You've got the universe figured out. Just trust in yourself more. Right. And every person has to find that inner voice. Right. And as I did that, it led me to a series of very obscure books from different angles, Hawaiian spirituality, Montauk Chia, and like these books, The Ringing Cedars, all these different, Carlos Castaneda, who's like a famous anthropologist from the 60s that found like a Yaqui Indian and did, I think that's the way you pronounce it. And like found, he became his apprentice in doing a bunch of peyote in the desert and like trying to find himself. Right. And he wrote like a series of 9 books. I read the first one, but like I've surrounded myself, regardless of what a government or society says, I've surrounded myself in a place of like deep thought and learning. And in reading all these things from all these different cultures, all these different times, you see this very clear common thread, right? Of just the strength and purity of your thoughts have the most impact on what you will experience, hands down. Right. And it's something I've actually believed this, like when people are asking me like, how did I come from a single parent family, drop out of high school, like, get in trouble, spend time in juvenile detention, and then end up building like institutional real estate buildings in New York and San Francisco. And I'm like, I don't know how to explain it other than I always believed it was possible. I always had this thought in my mind. I never doubted that I would make it, right? There was times where I was tested and I really was feeling the weight of all those things, but it was because I got away from that singular belief that I had it as long as I can remember. Since I was like 4 or 5 years old, I just knew that I could do it. And my mom created a space that was like, she would listen to all the crazy stuff that I said as a kid. And she would just tell me like a simple thing like, hey, I believe in you. I know you can do it. I know you can do anything you put your mind to. That was it. It wasn't any more complicated of a message than that. And that, the combination of my own inherent ability as a human, which everyone has, and a space that my mom created of just like true unconditional love, gives you the power to achieve anything, right? And it led me down my path. And I'll give you an example. I want to share, I don't want to do like too much spoiler alerts because I think everyone should experience these books on their own through their own frame of reference, right? Without me putting my own, because that's just my experience. But there's this in the Ring and Cedar series, it's about a Siberian entrepreneur who goes up into the forest, like these remote areas to make money and like deliver goods to these remote villages. in after the Soviet Union collapsed. He meets this family of, he calls them recluses, but they live in the Siberian forest with no structures. Like they literally live in a glade, right? There's no house, nothing, no plumbing, nothing. Absolutely, it's pure nature. He ends up having a son with one of the women, and she tells him, like, I don't really want you to come around until your thoughts are pure. And so there's a scene in one of the books where he's visiting his son, and people are like arguing about if this stuff is true or not. I have no idea, right? I'm reading it like everybody else, but somebody took the time to write 9 books about it, right? I'm not sure he just made all of it up. It was his own experience. He's meeting his son after not having seen him since he was like a baby. The kid is 5. And he's trying to figure out how to relate to him because the mom is like, don't bring any Western toys. This is like antiquated technology, right? It corrupts his own thought and mind, right? Let him just play in nature and see how the universe works himself. So he's having a discussion. He's like trying to figure out what to talk to with this 5-year-old kid about. And he's like, look, but you can't dispute 1 + 1 = 2. And he holds up 2 sticks. And the kid answers him something along the lines of, that's true when you freeze space and time, but in the universe, nothing ever stops. It's constantly in motion. And he's like, and I'll prove you wrong. The 5-year-old proves him wrong by saying, when you take a mama and you take a papa and they come together in a place of love, like you and mama did, then you create something new, which is me. So 1 + 1 = 3. And I was like, dude, that is like a simple and powerful message in terms of like the way that you think about things, that you get just inundated from a very young age, especially in like the modern Western school system, with things that are to be taken at face value and not questioned, right? What I'm experiencing is that the majority of those things are false, right? And when you freeze space and time, they may be true in these isolated things, but that's just not how the universe works.
So when you say living in a glade, you mean like a community just in an open field?
Dude, they're living in the forest. Like, and it's not even really a community. I mean, it's like their family. Like they each have their own little space that they sleep in. I mean, I'm talking, dude, it sounds wild. I understand that. They are truly raised in nature. Like the lady is at one with the animals, with every living thing. And she has respect for every living thing. You know, it is an interesting read from that perspective. And I think, dude, the modern mind, some people may need to take mushrooms to get to that place, to open up that space in their mind. Right. I want to get back to like kind of what you were asking about. I've been able to open that up just through meditation, right? And I've had some even more powerful meditations over the last few months that look, it's my own experience. Everyone has to verify it for themselves or whatever. I'm literally just trying to stay connected with my heart and live from a place of love, even as I operate my business and with people, different people. Everyone has crazy stuff going on right now. Right.
So when you think about like a small community, let's say bigger than a family unit, let's say a multifamily unit, what are the parts that are really necessary? Obviously, because we got your analogy of like growing your own food and what do you really need? And I think it becomes a little bit complex almost immediately when you have a group of families, for example, because the first thing that comes up is exchange, which is kind of one of the things we talked about with this GameStop thing, which is just the fast forward civilization, because at some point a group of families came together and were like, okay, what do we need? We need a way to exchange goods and services. So that's kind of a fundamental part. Then the second thing that I think that comes up, surprisingly, that second thing that comes up in my mind is incarceration. Because, okay, well, what if somebody comes up and and this was almost expressed in in the slightly better than mediocre movie The Village by M. Night, where where they this is exactly what they do. Small group of families living in a glade. They have small structures and grow all their own food. They have some exchange program, but don't run on a monetary system. And they're completely isolated in this in this village. And one of the first things that they developed was prison, in a weird way, because even in that scenario, you have to in some ways shape or control the actions that people do, so there's benefit of to each other and their surroundings. So I'm trying to like boil it down to like what are the key components of a group of people that really constitute what we would define as a community. And obviously food and shelter and all of those basics, but then you take one step further from there, the community relationship aspect and growth and contribution. And then the next parts are really exchange of goods and services, punishment, rehabilitation, incarceration. And what else? What are the other parts that you think would immediately, let's say if you were in a group and you had like 6 families on a compound, what would be within a month? You'd be like, well, shit, okay, well, we need to do this too now. Because I think in a month you'd be like, okay, well, let's figure out who's got what and who needs what, and we'll create an exchange. On day 3, you'd be like, okay, well, we need to punish some people, because they did this or they did that, or they stole, or these 2 people got in a fight or something,
Right. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So I think that some of these things that we end up with are just like the fast forwarding of the simple thought and basic thought, because that's basically where it was a few hundred years ago. You fast forward and we're basically just dealing with the same things now, but we got a bunch of complexity around it. But what are the other things that you think are unavoidable that would just be immediate, despite how natural, spiritual, and loving you want to make it? There would just be like immediate things that have to be introduced after that.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I would definitely question the need for incarceration, because I think that's like a fear-based structure, right? And I think more important than the community of 6 families coming together is what all of those people think collective, like individually and collectively, right? And I think if you look at like some of these like communes, why they haven't worked is because people do need private property. I believe that you need your own space, right? That you can cultivate on your own thing. And I think you have to operate out of like a sense of principles that, there's systems for it, like an HOA, but even the HOAs today are like, they're so complex. There's so many rules, and there's like, people take it, they go like straight prisoner's dilemma immediately, like checking people's mailbox heights and like hedge heights and all this stuff. I don't think you need any of that. I think it's more about finding the people that are ready as individuals to live in that space of peace, right? And then coming together and agreeing to kind of govern it from that place. If each individual, if someone's response to like baby's got she's got her own agenda.
Yeah.
No matter what Anna's doing,
so
she knows I'm here.
And I agree. I'm not convinced that like punishment, incarceration would be something that's so quick to be introduced, but it has been historically in previous civilizations. You always get a very quick, okay, we're not working together as a team. There's some people that are doing this outside crazy shit, and we need to rein that in somehow. And all primates have some massive loss aversion. You can really only motivate behavior by taking something away. So I'm on the fence about that. But I guess the real concern, which shows me that some of how we ended up today in the United States and just in modern society might be unavoidable, is that in a group like that, how long does it take before somebody creates something out of thin air and then presents it to others as if it has value and says, and now says, this is why you need to have it. So, for example, if I'm in a glade and there's nothing, you're still going to be dealing with a finite set of resources, and you're going to be dealing with goods exchange of services as well. Goods.
But why are you dealing with finite resources if nature regenerates itself? If you have a clean source of water and nature regenerates itself on a cycle for food, right? Through cultivation, what's the finite aspect in those resources?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think that I'm not sure that there has been a culture that's worked that way. In my understanding, in most cultures, including primitive cultures, there has always been some scarcity that has been introduced, and then that group migrates to some other area to seek additional resources. It could be because climate changes, the soil changes, it doesn't rain for a year. I mean, whatever the situation is, animals get sick. I mean, all kinds of things could happen to where now there's some scarcity that's introduced into that system. The community responds by saying, okay, we need to expand our footprint here, go seek some additional resources or whatever the case may be. And it puts this fear that holy shit, we don't have unlimited stuff, that some of this stuff could run out, and it produces an immediate price in the market for that stuff. Mm-hmm. And this has been also demonstrated in like primate species where they have tons of stuff. And as soon as they are demonstrated, there's some scarcity that's demonstrated there, they monetize the goods immediately and start dealing with the exchange systems. Even monkeys do that. So, and so I guess that when that happens, how long is it before somebody gets the bright idea that says, okay, I can make a new system here by creating an object that doesn't have any demand today, telling people that they want it, and then using that in order to capture more goods that I know are that have scarcity. So that is essentially what we're doing today by selling crap on Facebook to people who don't need it, and then working our asses off to get money to buy shit we don't need, because somebody has come up with the bright idea of, I'm going to make a thing, tell you that you want it, and sell it to you to force you to work in a thing you don't want to do to pay for the thing you don't want. So I'm wondering, you know what I mean?
Dude, you just said it so well, man. That was beautiful.
But I don't want to think about it like in too much of a Debbie Downer, like this idea of creating this utopia is going to have these forks in the road that come so quickly that we end up building the exact same system that we left no matter what, because it's just an unavoidable part of human civilization. And as soon as you get together, there's exchange. As soon as exchange happens, there's fraud. As soon as that happens, there's the elevation of goods to create demand. And that's just the introduction of scarcity. And then all of a sudden you're in the same shit you were. So that's kind of one of the things I think about when because we want to have a property and do all of this stuff and have unlimited, at least a sense that we've got unlimited food and we're in control and all of that stuff. But how long can you do that before you just start, before one of these things just starts staring you, staring down at you, and you start going back to work to get more?
I think it's a really important question because it's ultimately the question that every human will face, right? And I think my answer today would be, as soon as you eliminate the thought and belief that it's going to go away.
The scarcity.
Yeah. As soon as you're able to eliminate that within yourself, then you'll be able to cultivate through different energies of the universe, from a place of love, you know?
Yeah.
That's
So
it.
how do you,
I know which that sounds really simple, but it takes a lot of work to get to that place in my own experience.
what's the exercise? Because only a few people, I think, who have ever lived have transcended to the mental state where they no longer feel like that what's available to them is greater than what they want. You know, so
I don't think that's true. I think those people choose to be more private in nature. I think a lot of people have figured it out, and I think there's civilizations that have figured it out that may still be in existence today in very small numbers in remote areas that still believe that, have always believed that, and have always lived that way. And I think it's up to each person to go down that path on their own, right? From wherever you are today, the path is as short or as long as you make it as an individual, right?
so how does somebody get there? If they're stuck in the trapping of you know of what is no doubt a miserable existence for a lot of people.
I'm not laughing. It's just, it's crazy that
Has
is,
become normal. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then how do you get to a place where okay, what I really want is a lot less than what's available to me, and what's available is not difficult to get, and I know that I can be happy and fulfilled and with just that, and the acquisition of more does not increase how fulfilled I am. And I feel safe and secure, and that I have all of those needs met. Getting from where people are today to that point, what's that path?
I don't know that I can answer that for anyone but myself, right? Because I
How do you
do.
answer it for yourself?
Yeah, it's.
I mean, because you did answer it for yourself, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, it's still a process for me. I don't have that land, right? I'm in search of it. I know what I'm looking for. And I believe in that for sure. Right. I believe in that. I believe that lifestyle will shape generations of my family going forward, right? To continue to live that way, and they're all going to find their own path. I mean, my older kids were born in New York City. You can't unsee that, right? You can't unsee, me traveling 25 days a month, going coast to coast, trying to build buildings. Like I was taking my son to construction sites since he was 2, so he's going to have his own journey. And I don't think that there's a step-by-step process for everyone. I think obviously like meditation is highly underrated, right? And whether you do it for 30 seconds or 30 minutes, I think you can get.
How do you do it?
Dude, honestly, I used to structure everything. So I'm like, okay, 15 minutes of meditation, then 30 minutes of reading, and then this. And I started by just unfucking structuring all of that and say, I'm going to meditate now.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
and meditate.
I used to hear people say they meditate. I know what the word meditation means.
Yeah.
But I didn't know what meditation is per se. Like, okay, I'm going to meditate for the next 30 minutes. What does that mean? What do you do? Because I think, I'm not sure that people know how to do that.
Sure.
So how do you meditate? Because I can kind of tell you how I do it, and it's helpful for me. But how do you do it? Because it was tough for me to figure out even how.
Yeah. Well, I think it's I think a more important question, or an interesting question with a question is, why did you feel like you didn't know how to do it?
Well, because I think that when you're first thinking like, okay, you know what? I hear that everybody who's successful meditates, and it's true. Anybody who's truly successful and or happy and content with their life, meditation is a big part of it, and it is highly underutilized as a skill for most people. And I think that when you first start, people say that, okay, I know I need to do it, and I know I want to be doing it, and I've got some time set aside to do it. But then what am I doing exactly? And am I doing it right when I am doing it? And what am I, you know, and I think that it's the actual practice. Like, what am I supposed to be doing? Do I chant? Do I sit in a certain position? Do I go outside or inside? What should my lights be set up a certain? I think that there's a lot of people that have like no clue on what that looks like, and that prevents them from doing it.
Sure. Yeah.
So how did you start doing it? Because at one point I didn't at all, and neither did you. But
Yeah.
how did you start doing it, and how did you know that you were doing it right?
Well, like you, I had all those questions and my mind would race to all these different things. And so I just tried a bunch of different things, right? I tried with like meditative music. I personally felt like that early on in my meditation practice, meditate like some sort of meditative music. I just found something on Spotify, worked really well to help calm my mind. Right. Because I would go, if I was just doing it where it was quiet, I was also in New York City most of the time, or San Francisco. So there's constant stimulation around you. And that definitely was a challenge for me to go within. And I did it with pretty much the same, like 2 or 3 songs that were like, they ranged from like 10 to 20 minutes, for a couple of years. And then at some point, something within just said, I don't think you need the music anymore. Right. And so I just listened to myself and stopped listening to music. And since that day, I haven't listened to music when I meditate. You know, I think being in nature obviously helps. Like if you can get outside and just focus on listening to the beauty of what's around you. Right. And you start thinking about like, man, I don't have to do anything to breathe. Right. I don't have to do anything to see, and like how much of a gift that is to hear these sounds right now in this moment. Right. And I think that leads you to wanting to discover more about it. And there's plenty of resources. There's plenty of people that have like professionalized like how to connect with yourself. And I think all of those people have incredible insight, and they definitely have an angle. I personally believe that the most valuable resource that you have is you, right? That's
So
my own.
You started with music and
Yeah.
sound.
Yeah. Like similar to what they do in the Tony things when they kind of put on like a meditative song, right? I found something that worked for me, and that was it. Right. And you just go and start going. And honestly, like I had done like a day silent yoga retreat back in like 2012, literally a long time ago. And I remembered as I started meditating a little more, when we got there, I went with my wife and a good friend of mine. Shout out to Richie Horowitz, who probably is not on social media and is not on Spotify, but you know, he's a beautiful human. He invited my wife and I up to a silent retreat. And I remember I walked out. It'd been a long time since I'd even been in nature, because I'd been in the city. And I walked out on this dock on the property. We drove up to a farm. This woman who's a yoga instructor led it. And I just followed my own intuition and walked out to this lake and this little dock. And I started crying. And I had no idea why or what. I didn't even know what I was experiencing, but it was such a powerful experience in my heart. And I still didn't even, nobody was around me. Everybody was like spread out on the property. And I felt great after that. And as I kind of went deeper in meditation, I connected with that feeling each time I was meditating, whether it was for 90 seconds, whether I felt like I got interrupted or not. And then, you just continue to develop based on it. Just listen to yourself. I think people are trained to avoid their intuition, right? By society saying, yeah, but you could be wrong. Yeah, you could be wrong. Yeah, you're fucking wrong. Right? It's like, yeah, that was not right. That's impossible. If a human is listening to their own heart.
Well, it's like as written about in The Untethered Soul, which thank you for that book, by the way, fantastic. It is that internal dialogue of telling ourselves that we're inadequate is a part of human survival that is an evolutionary component of our mind that says, hey, what you're doing is not enough and who you are is not enough, because that's how you stay alive. That's how you don't get eaten by a lion. That's how you make sure that you're constantly in motion to try to figure out your environment. And that old software is still running in people's heads today, which it doesn't help that the rest of the external input is reinforcing that. But so what are your thoughts? Do you think do you think the internal dialogue is really geared around this evolutionary mechanism to tell you, hey, dumbass, stop doing what you're doing and do something different because you're going to get run over by a rhinoceros? Or do you think that it's really at a place of peace that we can that is already within us? Because I want to believe that that's the case. I want to believe that we could be at rest in our own minds and that we can achieve that through meditation.
Yeah.
But as the Untethered Soul says, the roommate that is in your head that is telling you that you need to get off your ass and do something because you are just woefully underperforming is a necessary part of human survival and has been for 10,000 years, really 150,000 years. What's your thought on that?
I think that's the story that's been fed to us, right? I think it's a program. I think people have been programmed to believe that is true, right? And I think people have indoctrinated themselves with that, and then they indoctrinate their families with that, and then they indoctrinate society with that. Look, I'm at a place of peace no matter what happens. Like literally I understand that feeling of like the constantly like, oh shit, I need more. I've experienced that most of my life. I've been at true peace for a very small fraction of my whole life.
Yeah.
On a conscious level. But once you awaken that, you can't unsee that either. You can't unexperience those moments, and they do stack on top of each other, and you go deeper each time. And I think you can get to this place where like you're making those judgments and decisions from a place of peace and a place connected in your heart. But I do think I studied history in college, and I majored in it, and I would question anything that's been put forth as history, right? To the ultimate degree, right? It was documented by who, right? Who documented this stuff, right? And we've gotten away from that, and even science has like gone down that path where like we've seen it during the pandemic. First, it was like, don't wear masks. Then it was wear masks. But it was don't wear masks because politicians were concerned that people would run on the masks and then not enough would be available. Like that's what came out later. Then it was like, you can get this virus from touching surfaces. You can't get it from touching surfaces. People that have it that don't show symptoms can spread it. People that have it that don't show symptoms can't spread it. This just shows you the fucking chaos of the human mind, right? It shows you the chaos of the human mind. And if you just take a step back and breathe, go out on a hike, into nature, on a walk. If you live in a city, just get out for one day. Trust me, it's worth whatever it costs to rent a car or to pay an Uber to fucking wait for you or whatever, right? Borrow a car. There's always a way. Just go out into nature with no technology for one day. Bring some water with you. Maybe not even bring food if you're interested in it. And just try to stay connected in the moment and observe what's around you. And then come back and start synthesizing the universe through that lens, right? Yeah. That's as best as I can say without, I could give people a step-by-step process, but what worked for me may not work for you, right? I think finding, like to your point, a bunch of people that appear to be content, meditate. Okay, maybe that's the universe sending a huge flashing signal to you that it's something you should try. And is it going to be easy at first? No, because you're trained to check this thing incessantly like a fucking rat looking to get water from a bottle, right? Or food, right? You've been trained to do that, whether it was intentional or not. That's irrelevant to me. I don't view the universe as like the good versus the bad. I view it as like it's each man and woman and human, whatever you identify as yourself, right? That's what you're up against. You're up against yourself. The world trains you to be up against all these external forces, the hero's journey, like all these things. That journey starts within. And there's no way to start that journey unless you start looking within.
Yeah. I want to share how I started meditating specifically because it's a little bit different. And then we can end on that note so I can get ready for 1 o'clock. But it started because my mind is super active and I'm always thinking about something. And a lot of that stuff is not productive at all. And even when I try to sleep sometimes, it just runs away with shit I got to be doing, stuff I got to do tomorrow, what I didn't get done today, all kinds of stuff just constantly going around upstairs. But you know that there was a time, and it wasn't for me to seek meditation more than it found me. And there are times when I don't think about anything. And I found that those times were when I'm in the gym. So I use a strategy instead of music that's more of like the counting sheep or chopping wood strategy. That in my head, in some cases, like if I did like clean and jerks that day, for example, I do cleans in my head. When I'm thinking about that, I'm not thinking about anything else. I'm thinking about the technique of that clean. When I'm doing the actual clean, I'm only not thinking about anything. And when I'm doing the clean in my head, I'm not thinking about anything other than that either. And then what ends up happening is you can stop doing that exercise and not think about anything. And that's the key to meditation, is stopping that noise in your mind one way or another, whether it's because the music is stopping that thought, whether you're actively trying to stop that thought by making it quieter and quieter. Or in my case, if I just think about one thing, like chopping one piece of wood and then putting another piece of wood and just chopping that wood, for some reason, I can't think of anything else other than that task,
That's awesome.
I'm like singularly focused on that task. And then I can even in that case, imagine myself taking a break from doing the task in my head, and then I'm not thinking about anything. And how long can I stay in that state where there's no thought at all? And that builds this muscle that says I can stop my thinking when I want to. And that has been a huge power, because there are times when during the day, for example, your anxiety starts building up because there are these thoughts running around in your head. And now I've got this strong muscle that says, you know what? I know how to stop that thinking immediately. And that to me has been a major advantage, because what it does is when you can make it quiet and you can stop that chain of thought, then I can be deliberate about what action I want to take in reality. Otherwise, you're just because you get some fleeting thought in your mind, you have an emotional reaction to it, and then you take some impulsive action that might not be in service to you, and really. Whereas if you can make that thought quiet and be flat in your response and really listen and be aware to what it is that's happening, then really think about what result and outcome do I really want here, and then be decisive and clear on the action that I take. It all stems from the fact that the thought itself, I'm in control of, instead of the thought just popping into my head and then me just being a victim to whatever random thought is populating in my head at that moment. And a lot of that starts with with I think the simplicity of using your body in reality to stop the thinking, then using that motion in your mind in my way. Like, I know when some people do this in long distance running. If I'm long distance running, sometimes I don't think about anything. But if I'm long distance running in my head too, I'm not thinking about anything either. And then what if I'm long distance running, but then I sit down to take a break in my head on my run? Now I'm not thinking about anything, and my internal self is sitting down and taking a break and not thinking about anything either. And then pretty soon, those two things merge into one, where you're in control of your mind. And anytime that I need to regain control in my head, I just strap on my shoes and I can go for a run in my mind, and it's instantly quiet, So, and I think that if for people who are not meditating today, that are trying to get started, I think that would be the first thing that I would say is find the thing that you do now where you don't think, and you do it, and it's like a motion, and you can use your body to quiet your mind.
Yeah.
And then if you repeat that motion in your head and you're not moving in space at all, then does that interrupt this, a chain of negative thought? Can you interrupt that chain of negative thought by saying, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to stop here and I'm going to go for a 5K in my head for the next 20 minutes.
Totally. Dude, that's awesome. I love that. It's very I've never heard anyone describe it that way. That's incredible. But yeah, I think you listened to yourself, right? You took the time to say, okay, where am I getting this quietness? And it reminds me of something that I always try to drop to my kids, where I'm like, your mind is a tool. Use the tool. Don't let the tool use you.
Yeah.
That's it. And I just repeat that to them on stuff like, hey, your mind is just a tool. Use the tool, right? Just like you'd use any other tool for any other thing,
Yeah, because man, and we mentioned this on an earlier discussion. It's just how long we spent in life being the recipient to how our mind was controlling us, rather than the realization of, wait a minute, I can decide what I want to think about, and what I think about it makes me feel one way or another. So really, I'm in control of my feelings too. By thinking certain things, I can feel certain things. And that is like a new unlocked power, to say that I'm in total control of my thoughts and my feelings. And that is that is, I think, one of the outcomes that comes from meditation, and why people say it's so important, because otherwise, just like you said, the tool is using you. And until you build that muscle to say, hey, I can control that thought, and then I can produce the feeling that I want. And that's because I exercised, in a way, the muscle that's required for me to control the thought.
Yeah. 100%, man. That's beautiful. Dude, I love you, man. I love, even these talks are a meditation,
Yeah. When we get, dude, hopefully we'll be able to get together here in the near future, because I don't know how this is going to turn out, but it is not looking optimistic in the near term.
Yeah.
But hopefully things will change and we'll get on top of it. But until then, let's keep doing it. And
for sure, bro.
I will jump on my 1 o'clock.
Yeah. Okay, man.
But let's find out where and when to meet again, and because there's still tons to talk about.
Absolutely. All right, man.
All right, brother.
Take it easy. Love you as always.
Talk soon. Mad love.